Wuyuan County, Jiangxi Province, China, 2003. On a fateful morning, Jiyu Weiten, a father known for his authoritarian nature, was found dead in his home, bearing fatal wounds. The sudden, brutal death of a family's patriarch was shocking enough, but what truly rocked the community were the whispers and rumors that spread like wildfire, centering on a fiery conflict between him and his only son, Jiyu Yixuan. This confrontation, which had taken place just days before the tragedy, stemmed from Yixuan's fervent desire to marry Shen Mohan, a young woman his father vehemently disapproved of. Was this the uncontrollable rage of a son pushed to his breaking point, where love and filial piety became opposing forces? Or, hidden behind the facade of a simple family tragedy, was another hand at play, a cruel conspiracy masked by crocodile tears and a shockingly innocent appearance? What truth lay buried in the soil of Wuyuan, waiting to be unearthed by the light of justice? The sky over Wuyuan had not yet fully brightened on the morning of July 15, 2003. In Shangqing Village, a small hamlet nestled among the lush green hills characteristic of the Jiangxi region, the air was still thick with the night's mist. But that deceptive peace was about to be shattered by a piercing scream, a scream that signaled the tragedy that had just befallen the Jiyu family. The first person to confront the horrific scene was Xia, Jiyu Weiten's wife. As usual, she woke up early to start her day. But something was different. Her husband, Weiten, who usually rose early to check on the family's small woodworking shop or walk through the garden, had said the night before that he would stay up late to watch TV in the living room. And Xia didn't see him in the bedroom. A vague sense of unease crept into the mind of the simple country woman. She walked into the living room, and that's when her world collapsed. Jiyu Weiten, the 58-year-old pillar of the family, lay motionless on the floor. Blood. There was blood everywhere, soaking the tank top he often wore at home, spreading across the old tiled floor. His sturdy farmer's body was marked with deep wounds, clear signs of a struggle, a brutal attack. The scene didn't suggest a large-scale robbery. Only a few chairs were knocked over, a glass shattered on the floor, its fragments mirroring the shattered life of Weiten. And Xia's heart-wrenching scream broke the morning silence. She rushed to her husband's side, shaking him in a hopeless attempt to wake him. The warmth had already left his body. Jiyu Weiten's eyes were still open, but they were empty, staring blankly at the ceiling as if trying to hold on to something unnameable. Panic consumed Xia. She trembled, stammering, unable to form words. Her desperate cries quickly drew the attention of the neighbors. They were simple country folk, living in close-knit community. The Jiyu family's door was ajar, unlocked. One by one, they cautiously stepped inside, and one by one, they froze at the sight before them. Whispers began to circulate, first of horror, then of speculation, of unanswered questions. No one could understand who could do such a cruel thing to Weiten, a man known for his directness. Had he offended someone? News of Jiyu Weiten's death spread through Shangqing Village with astonishing speed, casting a pall of grief and fear. Before long, the local police from Wuyuan County arrived. The Jiyu family home was quickly cordoned off. Investigators began their work, meticulously collecting every trace, every tiny detail that might reveal what had happened on that fateful night. Amid the curious onlookers and Xia's choked sobs, a young, dazed figure was brought home. It was Jiyu Yixuan, 26 years old, the victim's only son. He worked in town and had been urgently called back after receiving the terrible news. Yixuan's face was pale, his eyes staring into the void. The shock was so great he could barely stand. The father with whom he'd had a blazing argument just days ago was now gone. This brutal reality struck the young man like a hammer blow. The family tragedy had only just begun. The crime scene investigation and autopsy were conducted swiftly. The preliminary report from the forensic team indicated that Jiyu Weiten had died from massive blood loss caused by multiple wounds from a sharp object, likely a knife. The wounds were concentrated mainly in the chest and abdomen, indicating the ferocious nature of the attack. Experts estimated the time of death to be between 10 o'clock the previous night and the early hours of the morning the body was discovered. This meant the killer had struck under the cover of darkness, exploiting the quiet of the countryside to carry out their savage act. And Xia, though still in a state of severe shock, managed to provide an initial statement to the investigators. She recounted that the previous evening, she and her husband had a small disagreement, mainly revolving around their son, Jiyu Yixuan, and his girlfriend, Shen Mohan. Such arguments had become common in the GU household recently. Afterwards, feeling tired, Xia went to bed, leaving Whiten alone in the living room. Her husband, she said, often stayed up late watching TV or reading. She insisted she heard no unusual noises, no cries for help or signs of a struggle. Her sleep, perhaps from exhaustion or habit, had been too deep. The investigation quickly zeroed in on Gu Yixuan, the victim's only son. He was brought in for questioning as soon as he had composed himself enough to speak. Faced with sharp questions, Yixuan did not hide the fact that he and his father had a major conflict. He admitted that just a few days before the tragedy, they had a fierce argument. The main reason, Yixuan stated, was that he had asked his father for a large sum of money to prepare for his wedding to Shen Mohan, but Whiten had flatly refused. The exchange grew heated, ending in extreme tension. However, Yixuan staunchly maintained his innocence. He claimed that on the night of the murder, he was not at home in Shangqing village. Instead, he was at his rented room in the county town with his girlfriend, Shen Mohan. This was a crucial detail, a potential alibi, but it also raised new questions for the investigators. Was Yixuan's statement completely reliable? Just how complicated was the relationship between him and his late father? Following Gu Yixuan's statement, the next person summoned by the authorities was Shen Mohan, his girlfriend, the young woman at the center of the Gu family's conflicts. When Mohan appeared at the police station, she had a sorrowful expression, her eyes swollen from crying. She continually dabbed at her tears with a handkerchief, her voice choked with emotion, expressing her grief over the death of Gu Whiten, the man she had hoped to call her father-in-law. To the investigators, Shen Mohan confirmed Gu Yixuan's alibi. She asserted that on the night of the murder, Yixuan was with her at their rented room in town. They had been together all night, and Yixuan had not left at all. Mohan expressed her deep love for Yixuan and her earnest desire for his family's approval, so she could officially become a daughter-in-law of the Gu family. Mohan's fragile, weak appearance and her tears elicited sympathy from some. However, information gathered from neighbors in Shangqing village painted a starkly different picture of Gu Whiten's attitude towards Shen Mohan. Many villagers revealed that Whiten vehemently opposed the relationship. He had often expressed his mistrust, believing Mohan was not a decent or respectable young woman. Some even overheard Whiten using harsh words, claiming Mohan was only after his family's money, a gold digger and nothing more. The peak of his opposition, according to a few witnesses, was when Whiten, in a fit of anger, loudly threatened to disown Gu Yixuan if he dared to defy his father and marry Mohan. The contrast between the image Mohan projected and what the locals knew about the victim's feelings toward her began to raise suspicion. In an effort to find more clues, investigators examined the call histories on Gu Yixuan's and Shen Mohan's mobile phones. In 2003, cell phones were becoming increasingly common, especially for young people like Yixuan and Mohan who worked in town. Analyzing the text messages exchanged between them in recent days, the police found ample evidence of Yixuan's extreme frustration and desperation in the face of his father's opposition. Meanwhile, the messages from Shen Mohan had a different tone. Alongside words of comfort and encouragement were phrases that were pressuring, even strangely suggestive, as if she were subtly pushing Yixuan toward a more drastic solution. The image of the future daughter-in-law began to appear more complex and unpredictable in the eyes of the investigators. To gain a more comprehensive view of the case, investigators began to delve into the life and relationships of the victim, Gu Whiten. Through the accounts of relatives, neighbors, and acquaintances, a portrait of Whiten gradually emerged. He was a hard-working and diligent man who had toiled his entire life to build a future for his family. Starting from nothing, he had established a small woodworking shop, which, though not large, provided a stable income and employed a few people from the village. Whiten was known for being frugal, even stingy with himself, but spared no expense for his only son, Gu Yixuan. However, his love for his son was expressed through strictness, sometimes to the point of being authoritarian and conservative. He always wanted his son to follow his arrangements, from education and work to the major matter of marriage. Within the extended family, Whiten was also a respected voice, valued for his frankness and experience. His small woodworking shop was the family's main source of income. Investigators reviewed his business dealings. Recently, there had been a few minor disputes, insignificant disagreements with some wood suppliers or customers over prices and product quality. However, All these conflicts were deemed not serious enough to lead to a vengeful act as brutal as murder. His debts were also small and negligible. It seemed the motive for the crime did not stem from the victim's business troubles. During her testimony, Xia, after her initial moments of panic, began to recall some unusual details about her husband in the recent past. She said that a few weeks before the murder, Whiten had seemed more contemplative than usual. He was less talkative, easily irritated without cause, and often sighed when he was alone. In particular, Xia recalled once overhearing him on the phone, his voice tense, angrily saying he wouldn't let someone deceive his family and that he wouldn't let it go. Xia didn't know who her husband was talking to and didn't dare ask, given his patriarchal nature and his dislike of his wife meddling in outside affairs. This detail immediately caught the investigators' attention. Had Ji Whiten discovered something, some deception that could be related to his tragic end? Information from Luo Xing, Ji Yixuan's best friend, shed more light on the young man's life, especially the pressures he faced before the tragedy. Xing and Yixuan grew up together in Shangqing village and understood each other's personalities and circumstances well. According to Xing, Yixuan was a gentle, somewhat meek person, but also very conscious of his image. Recently, Yixuan had often confided in Xing about the difficulties in his relationship with Shen Mohan. Xing stated that Ji Yixuan was under a great deal of pressure from Shen Mohan and her family regarding their marriage. Specifically, Mohan's mother repeatedly made demands for a betrothal gift, gold, and a separate house in the county town as a prerequisite for the marriage. This sum was an enormous burden for Yixuan and his family, whose main income came solely from Ji Whiten's small woodworking shop. Yixuan felt completely cornered. He wanted to please his girlfriend and her family, but he also didn't want to trouble or inconvenience his own parents. This inner conflict caused him many sleepless nights, and his mood grew progressively worse. He was afraid of losing Mohan but didn't know how to meet the ever-increasing material demands. To verify Luo Xingyi's account, investigators looked into Shen Mohan's family. What they gathered further confirmed the immense pressure Yixuan was under. Mrs. Shen, Mohan's mother, was described by many in her neighborhood as a materialistic woman who loved to show off and was particularly concerned with money. She did not hesitate to apply direct pressure on Ji Yixuan, frequently calling to urge him and even comparing him to other people's sons-in-law. The betrothal gift demanded by Mohan's family was indeed a very large sum, far exceeding the Ji family's financial capacity at the time. It seemed that for Mohan's mother, her daughter's marriage was not just a matter of love, but also an opportunity to improve her family's economic situation. While in custody for questioning, Ji Yixuan began to show signs of psychological instability. At times he would break down, crying and blaming himself for defying his father. At other times, he appeared defiant, almost challenging. Yixuan consistently maintained his innocence but was flustered and unable to explain many suspicious points. The contradictions in his attitude and statements made investigators even more suspicious of his true role in the case. The immense pressure from all sides seemed to have pushed the young man into an extremely difficult position and had, perhaps, changed him as a person. After days of careful work, the crime scene investigation team completed their detailed report, providing more crucial pieces to the puzzle of the murder at Ji Whiten's home. One of the first notable findings was the absence of any signs of forced entry at the main door or windows of the house. This suggested that the killer was likely someone known to the family or had entered the house easily, with prior preparation, rather than a common burglary that escalated to murder. Near the back door of the kitchen, a less used entrance that was often not securely locked at night, forensic technicians found a few strange shoe prints. These prints were quite large and did not match any of the Ji family members. Unfortunately, due to a light but prolonged rain the night before the murder, these shoe prints were partially washed away, making detailed analysis and identification difficult. However, their presence at the back door was an important clue about the killer's entry and escape route. Another obstacle for the investigation was that the murder weapon had not yet been found. Investigators conducted a thorough search inside and around the house, but the sharp knife that took Ji Whiten's life seemed to have vanished without a trace. Meanwhile, a piece of information from a local resident opened up a new line of reasoning. A neighbor of the Ji family, an elderly man who was a night owl, recalled an important detail. Around 11 p.m. on the night of the murder, as he was preparing to lock up and go to bed, he briefly saw a strange man wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his face, loitering on the small road near Gu Whiten's house. Due to the darkness, the distance, and his poor eyesight, the old man couldn't see the person's face or any other identifying features. However, the presence of a stranger at such a sensitive time in a usually quiet village was highly significant. Could this mysterious figure be connected to Gu Whiten's death? Was this the person who had killed him? These details from the scene and witness testimony, though still fragmented, were beginning to reveal the more complex aspects of the case. When investigators re-interrogated Gu Yixuan and Shen Mohan separately, focusing on the specific details of their timeline on the night of the murder, some minor inconsistencies began to emerge. Initially, both seemed quite confident in their alibi. However, when pressed with specific questions about who did what, when, and where in the rented room, their answers started to diverge. For example, Yixuan said they watched a movie on TV together late into the night, while Mohan remembered that Yixuan went to bed earlier because he was tired. Regarding a phone call Yixuan made, Mohan and Yixuan also gave 2 different times, about half an hour apart. What was striking was that after realizing these contradictions through the investigators' questioning, both Yixuan and Mohan seemed to quickly adjust their statements in subsequent interviews. They tried to explain that they misremembered due to the panic, or that perhaps things happened a certain way, all in an effort to make their stories consistent. This change did not escape the notice of the experienced investigators, raising suspicions that they had pre-arranged their alibi or were, at the very least, trying to cover something up. In their sessions, Shen Mohan was very proactive in trying to steer the investigation's suspicion. She repeatedly suggested that Gu Whiten had complex business dealings, implying he might have offended a partner who then sought revenge. Or, she hinted at the possibility that Whiten had conflicts with relatives over land or inheritance. Mohan tried to paint herself and Yixuan as outsiders who were just accidentally caught up in the tragedy. Another unexpected development came from Anxia. During a supplementary statement, the grieving woman suddenly changed part of her initial testimony. She said that maybe, just maybe, she had heard some strange noises from the living room that night, but being so tired and sleepy, she hadn't paid attention and had fallen asleep. She was no longer certain that she hadn't heard anything unusual. This change, though small, was significant. It seemed Anxia was under some kind of psychological pressure, or perhaps she was trying to protect someone. Was it her only son, Gu Yixuan, or someone else she didn't want to mention? The conflicting and constantly changing testimonies were making the mystery of the case even denser. The pressure from the investigation and public speculation began to create cracks in the seemingly solid relationship between Gu Yixuan and Shen Mohan. Initially, they faced suspicion together, building their alibi as a team. But as the investigation dragged on, underlying tensions started to surface. While gathering information about Shen Mohan, investigators spoke with one of her old friends. This friend, perhaps unintentionally or for some other reason, revealed some unsavory details about Mohan's romantic past. According to this friend, before meeting and falling in love with Gu Yixuan, Mohan had been in several other relationships. The common thread in all of them was that Mohan always placed a high value on material things. She frequently demanded money and expensive gifts from her boyfriends. This information was like a splash of cold water on the sweet words of sincere love that Mohan had always told Yixuan. The tight police surveillance, lengthy interrogations, and suspicious glances from everyone around them made the atmosphere between Yixuan and Mohan increasingly heavy. They began to have small arguments, which started with reproaches and then escalated to mutual suspicion. Yixuan, already in a state of confusion and despair, began to feel uneasy about the information concerning his girlfriend's past. In a rare private moment, when only the two of them were in the rented room, Shen Mohan used all her charm and manipulative skills to regain control over Gu Yixuan. She embraced him, using words that were both soft and slightly threatening. She cried, claiming she was being framed, that everyone was trying to tear their love apart. Mohan planted toxic thoughts in Yixuan's mind, suggesting that all their troubles were caused by Gu Whiten's opposition. She whispered in his ear, implying that if it weren't for his father's interference, if he had approved of them, they would be happy by now. In Yixuan's weak and cornered state of mind, these words had a powerful effect. They not only temporarily placated him but also sowed seeds of dependency, confusion, and a dangerous element into the young man's psyche. Their relationship, though appearing bonded on the surface, had actually developed widening cracks, signaling a break that would be difficult to mend. Just as the investigation seemed to be hitting a dead end, with conflicting testimonies and a lack of direct physical evidence, an unexpected witness appeared, bringing a new ray of hope for solving the case. He was a nighttime motorcycle taxi driver in Wuyuan County town. After reading about Ji Whiten's murder in the local newspaper and hearing the local gossip, the driver felt he had something to report to the police. According to the driver's testimony, on the night of the murder, around 1 a.m., just a few hours after Ji Whiten's estimated time of death, he picked up a male passenger. What was unusual was that this passenger hailed him from a small, dark alley near the rental complex where Ji Yixuan and Shen Mohan lived. The destination the passenger requested was in the direction of Shangqing village, where the victim's family resided. The man wore a baseball cap pulled down low, covering most of his face, and a surgical mask, making it impossible for the driver to see his features. The passenger's demeanor was also strange. He seemed tense and spoke little, but he paid the fare generously, even adding a tip, and told the driver not to ask questions, just to take him to the destination. When asked to describe the mysterious passenger's build and clothing, the driver said he was a man of average height and a slightly stocky build. He wore a dark-colored jacket. These details, though not very specific, bore a surprising resemblance to the description given by the elderly neighbor of the strange man who had been loitering near Ji Whiten's house around 11 p.m. that night. Both mentioned the baseball cap and the furtive appearance. Immediately, investigators confronted Ji Yixuan and Shen Mohan with this information. Both adamantly denied that anyone had visited their rental room that night, nor had anyone left their room around the time the driver mentioned. They insisted it was just the two of them. This denial only heightened the police's suspicion. Were Yixuan and Mohan deliberately hiding the presence of a third person? Who was the mysterious man the driver had picked up? And what was his role in Ji Whiten's death? The appearance of this new witness opened up a critical line of inquiry, directing the investigators' attention to the possibility of an accomplice, or another mastermind still lurking in the shadows. Faced with these new developments and the increasing complexity of the case, investigators decided to dig deeper into the past of Shen Mohan, the young, beautiful woman who seemed to be holding many secrets. They sent a team to her hometown to gather information. What they discovered was truly shocking, painting a portrait completely different from the innocent, gentle image Mohan tried to project. In her hometown, Shen Mohan was known by a different name. She had previously been in a common-law marriage, a relationship that was not accepted by her family and did not last long. Worse, Mohan had a child from this relationship. The child was later left behind in her hometown for her maternal grandparents, Mohan's parents, to raise. She had almost completely cut off contact and took no responsibility for her own child. This truth was carefully hidden by Mohan. Even Ji Yixuan, who was deeply in love with her, was completely unaware. It didn't stop there. The investigation also revealed that before coming to Wuyuan County and meeting Ji Yixuan, Shen Mohan had worked for a time at a notorious and unsavory karaoke bar in another city. This type of work environment often harbored many temptations and shady relationships. Although there was no concrete evidence of Mohan's involvement in illegal activities, the fact that she had worked in such a place was enough to raise questions about her character and lifestyle. Another crucial discovery, possibly the key to unlocking the next mysteries, was that Shen Mohan was still in regular contact with a man named Ji Wuji. This man also came from Mohan's hometown. What was noteworthy was that Ji Wuji had a criminal record, with a prior conviction for assault. Records showed Wuji was a violent thug, ready to use force to resolve conflicts. The connection between Shen Mohan, a young woman trying to build a clean image to marry into a well-off family like the Gus, and a disreputable character like Ji Wuji raised many questions. What did this connection mean? Could Wuji be the mysterious man who appeared near Ji Whiten's house and was picked up by the motorcycle taxi driver on the night of the murder? Shen Mohan's complicated past and suspicious relationships were gradually placing her at the center of a vortex of suspicion. With the crucial information gathered about the connection between Shen Mohan and Ji Wuji, a summons for Ji Wuji was issued immediately. The appearance of this character marked a major turning point in the investigation. A few days later, Ji Wuji, a man in his 30s with a thuggish appearance and cold, sharp eyes, appeared at the Wuyuan County Investigation Bureau. Contrary to many people's expectations, Ji Wuji appeared very calm, even indifferent, when facing the investigators. He showed no signs of nervousness or fear. When asked about his relationship with Shen Mohan, Wooji casually admitted to knowing her. He claimed Mohan was an old friend from his hometown and that they occasionally kept in touch, but there was nothing more to it. Regarding the night of Ji Whiten's murder, Ji Wooji provided an alibi. He claimed he was at home alone in his rented room in a neighboring county and hadn't gone anywhere. However, this alibi was rather flimsy, as there was no one to confirm he was home alone. What was striking was that Ji Wooji's physical appearance, his stocky build, average height, and rugged style of dress, matched surprisingly well with the descriptions provided by the motorcycle taxi driver and the elderly neighbor of the stranger who appeared on the night of the murder. In particular, when asked to identify him from a photo, although the face was not clear, both witnesses reacted in a way that suggested Wooji bore a strong resemblance to the man they had seen. When Shen Mohan learned that Ji Wooji had been summoned and was being questioned, she became extremely anxious and uneasy. Although she tried to hide her emotions, her restlessness, fidgeting, and constantly darting eyes did not escape the investigators' observation. She tried every means possible to contact Ji Wooji, or at least to find out what he had told the police. Mohan's panic further fueled suspicions about the true nature of her relationship with Ji Wooji, as well as their roles in the murder case. Was Ji Wooji the mysterious man who had murdered Ji Whiten? And if so, what was Shen Mohan's involvement in his actions? The appearance of Ji Wooji had completely changed the landscape of the case, focusing the investigation on an organized conspiracy, far more complex than a simple domestic dispute. Realizing the situation was becoming increasingly unfavorable, especially with Ji Wooji now on the police's radar, Shen Mohan initiated a new plan, a plan to manipulate those around her, especially Ji Yixuan, to save herself. She knew that if her connection with Wooji was exposed, all her efforts to build her image and her plans for a new life would be shattered. In a meeting with Ji Yixuan, permitted by the investigators, Shen Mohan put on a perfect performance. She sobbed uncontrollably, trying to convince Yixuan that Ji Wooji was a villain, a thug who had pursued and harassed her in the past. Mohan tried to persuade Yixuan that Wooji, out of jealousy and his inability to win her affection, had murdered Ji Whiten. Wooji's goal, according to Mohan, was to frame Yixuan, get him sent to prison, thereby tearing their love apart and getting revenge on her. She also hinted that Wooji might have found out about her impending marriage to Yixuan, which drove him to such a desperate act. Ji Yixuan, who was weak-willed, easily influenced, and currently in an unstable psychological state and blindly in love with Shen Mohan, completely believed his lover's tearful words. The image of a fragile, pitiful Mohan, victimized by a villain, stirred up his sympathy and protective instincts. Without a shred of doubt, he grew to despise Ji Wooji, seeing him as the one who had caused all their suffering and taken his father's life. Shen Mohan's psychological manipulation of Yixuan was a resounding success. Not stopping there, Shen Mohan also found a way to approach and influence Xia, Yixuan's mother. She used the same tears and pitiful words to tell the story she had fabricated. Mohan tried to convince Mrs. N that Ji Wooji was the real killer, and that his arrest would exonerate Yixuan and secure his freedom. Xia, a simple country woman who had only known her husband and son her whole life, and was consumed by the pain of losing her husband and fear for her son's future, was also easily persuaded by Mohan's words. She believed that focusing the investigation on Ji Wooji was the only way to protect Ji Yixuan, her only son. With her cunning and brilliant acting, Shen Mohan successfully shifted the suspicion of the victim's closest relatives onto Ji Wooji, while simultaneously reinforcing her own position as a victim in their eyes. The investigation continued with relentless police efforts. After days of tireless searching, based on a review of areas where the killer might have disposed of evidence, a crucial clue was finally discovered. The murder weapon, the knife that had taken Ji Whiten's life, was found in a dense thicket not far from the victim's house, on the path leading to the fields. It was a common, large, sharp kitchen knife, still stained with dried, blackened blood. However, having been discarded outdoors for some time and exposed to the elements, no clear fingerprints remained on its surface for comparison. Nevertheless, finding the weapon was a major breakthrough. Forensic experts carefully examined the knife. They discovered that on the handle and blade, besides the victim's blood, there were a few very small, dark-colored fabric fibers. Preliminary analysis showed that these fibers did not match any of the clothing collected from the Ji family members for comparison. This strongly suggested that the fibers belonged to the killer's clothing, snagged during the crime or while disposing of the weapon. At the same time, another piece of information from a local resident was reported to the authorities. A vendor at the small market near Gu Whiten's house recalled that a few days before the murder, they had seen a man with a physical description quite similar to Ji Wuji loitering in the market. This man didn't buy much, mostly just walked around observing, and seemed to be watching Gu Whiten's house from a distance. Initially, the vendor didn't pay much attention, but after learning that Ji Wuji had been summoned in connection with the case, they connected the events and decided to report it. These new clues, the discovery of the murder weapon, the strange fibers on the knife, and the information that Ji Wuji might have been surveilling the victim beforehand, were increasingly strengthening the suspicion against him. However, many questions remained unanswered. If Wuji was the killer, what was his motive? Did he act alone, or with someone else's help? And what role did Shen Mohan, the woman with a shady connection to Wuji, play in all of this? The investigation was entering a tense phase as the scattered pieces began to connect. With the new evidence, including the murder weapon with the strange fabric fibers and the witness testimony about Ji Wuji loitering near the victim's home, investigators decided to confront him once again. This time, his initial calm and defiant demeanor was gone. When shown the photo of the knife and the fibers, Wuji became flustered, his eyes constantly avoiding contact. His answers about his whereabouts in the days leading up to and on the night of the murder became hesitant, inconsistent, and more contradictory than in his first statement. His alibi of being home alone grew weaker and less credible. An emergency search warrant for Ji Wuji's residence was executed shortly after. In the shabby rented room where Wuji lived in the neighboring county, investigators found a dark-colored, rather old jacket. What was special was that upon close examination, they found the fabric of this jacket perfectly matched the strange fibers found on the murder weapon. This was a crucial piece of physical evidence, directly linking Ji Wuji to the knife that killed Gu Whiten. Faced with this irrefutable evidence, Ji Wuji became even more panicked. However, he stubbornly refused to confess to the murder. He tried to offer convoluted explanations, claiming he might have lent the jacket to someone, or that the fibers on the knife were just a coincidence. But these excuses became increasingly weak and nonsensical. Under the pressure of interrogation and the sharp evidence, Ji Wuji finally admitted to part of the truth. He confessed that on the night of the murder, he had come to Wuyuan County. He also admitted to meeting Shen Mohan that evening. However, Wuji only admitted to coming to Wuyuan to handle some personal business and that his meeting with Mohan was purely coincidental. He still adamantly denied any involvement in Gu Whiten's death. Although Ji Wuji had not fully confessed, his new statements, along with the physical evidence, showed that he was lying and concealing important facts. His presence in Wuyuan and his meeting with Shen Mohan on the night of the murder were a pivotal detail, opening up the possibility of a conspiracy, a pre-planned plot. Wuji's testimony was not only crumbling but was also beginning to reveal the missing links in the chain of events that led to the Gu family's tragedy. The investigative pressure was now not only on Ji Wuji but also on Shen Mohan, the woman who seemed to hold the key to the case. Ji Wuji's admission of being in Wuyuan and meeting Shen Mohan on the night of the murder compelled investigators to uncover the true nature of their relationship. They reviewed the call and text message history between Mohan and Wuji over a longer period, not just limited to the days around the time of the murder. The results were astounding. Data from the telecommunications company showed that Shen Mohan and Ji Wuji did not just occasionally keep in touch as Wuji had initially claimed. In fact, they communicated very frequently, with a density of calls and messages far exceeding that of normal old friends. More notably, many calls and texts were made right before and right after Gu Whiten was killed. Although the specific content of the calls could not be recovered, some partially restored text messages contained highly suggestive words and ambiguous phrases, as if they were discussing a secret plan they didn't want others to know about. Meanwhile, the investigation team in Mohan and Wuji's hometown gathered an invaluable piece of information. An old acquaintance of both, after some hesitation, finally decided to provide a statement. This person revealed that Shen Mohan and Ji Wuji were not just friends from the same town. In the past, they had been lovers for a long time. This relationship took place before Mohan left her hometown for the city and later came to Wuyuan. According to this person, Ji Wuji doted on Shen Mohan, willing to do anything she asked, including illegal acts. Mohan, with her beauty and cunning, had complete control over Wuji. With this new evidence, Shen Mohan was summoned for questioning once more. This time, the investigators were no longer gentle. They directly presented the evidence of the unusually frequent communication, the suspicious text messages, and the witness testimony about her past romantic relationship with Ji Wuji. Faced with these irrefutable truths, Shen Mohan began to lose her composure. Her usual sorrowful, innocent facade vanished, replaced by visible tension and fear. However, she still tried to deny everything to the end. Mohan insisted she was being framed, trying to blame everything on Ji Wuji, claiming he acted on his own. She attempted to shift all the blame onto Wuji, making him the sole mastermind and herself just a victim caught in the crossfire. But these last-ditch efforts by Mohan became increasingly futile against the weight of the evidence. The veil of secrecy over her relationship with Ji Wuji was slowly being lifted, revealing a much darker and more complex truth. While the investigation focused on Shen Mohan and Ji Wuji, the behavior of Anxia, Ji Yixuan's mother and the victim's wife, did not escape the investigators' notice. Since her husband's death, Mrs. N had been in a state of collapse. However, recently, her anxiety had become more pronounced. She often cried alone, constantly mumbling prayers to the gods to protect her son, Ji Yixuan, from harm. This behavior was not just the grief of a wife who lost her husband or a mother worried for her son. It seemed to hide something else, a fear, a torment she couldn't speak of. With encouragement and prompting from the investigators, hoping to find the truth and free herself from her haunting thoughts, Anxia finally recalled a crucial detail she had previously overlooked or deliberately avoided mentioning. She recounted that on the night of the murder, after Ji Whiten said he would watch TV late and she had gone to bed, she heard low voices from the living room. At first, she didn't pay much attention, assuming Whiten was watching TV or talking to himself. But then, she recognized another voice, a familiar female voice. It was Shen Mohan's. Mrs. N thought that perhaps Mohan had come to the house late at night to try to persuade Whiten one more time about her marriage to Yixuan. Not wanting to get involved and feeling tired, she didn't go out to check. When investigators questioned her more closely about this conversation, about what she might have heard, Anxia initially hesitated and evaded the questions. But then, as if unable to bear the burden of silence any longer, she confessed a shocking truth. She said she knew Shen Mohan was not the good girl she appeared to be. She had heard many unflattering rumors about Mohan. And most importantly, during the conversation that night between Mohan and her husband, although she only overheard fragments, she heard Whiten's voice being very firm, even threatening, saying he would report Mohan to the police for some terrible deed if she didn't leave Ji Yixuan alone and continued to cling to his family. This testimony from Anxia was like a thunderbolt. It not only confirmed Shen Mohan's presence at the crime scene on the night of the murder, something Mohan had always denied, but it also revealed a powerful potential motive for Mohan to want to eliminate Whiten. What was the terrible deed Whiten was referring to? Was it the secrets about Mohan's past that he had accidentally discovered? The mother's role, from a passive witness, had now become a crucial link, providing a detail that could completely overturn all of Shen Mohan's testimony and deceptions. The new developments in the investigation, especially the appearance of Ji Wuji and the revelations about Shen Mohan's shady past and relationships, had a profound impact on Ji Yixuan's psyche. The young man, already devastated by his father's death and the pressure of being a suspect, now had to face an even bigger shock. The woman he loved with all his heart, the one he was willing to defy his family to protect, might not be as innocent and pure as he had always thought. Ji Yixuan fell into a severe psychological crisis. He began to piece together the events, the words, the actions of Shen Mohan over the past months. The pressure to marry, the demands for material possessions, Mohan's hints about Ji Whiten being an obstacle, and the suspicious appearance of Ji Wuji. All these things now replayed in Yixuan's mind with a completely different meaning. He began to realize that perhaps Shen Mohan had deceived him, had used his love for her own dark purposes. Suspicion, disappointment, and fear consumed Yixuan's mind. At his most confused moment, his best friend, Luo Xing, came to visit. Xing not only offered encouragement but also tried to help Yixuan see things more clearly. Xing reminded him of the worries Yixuan had once shared about the pressure from Mohan and her family. He advised Yixuan not to blindly trust Shen Mohan anymore, but to be honest with himself and think carefully about Mohan's role in the whole affair, especially after Ji Wuji's appearance. Xingyi's advice was a painful but necessary wake-up call for Yuxuan at that moment. With the investigators' permission, a confrontation between Jiyu Yixuan and Shen Mohan was arranged. This time, Yixuan no longer unconditionally trusted and defended Mohan. He began to ask questions, to express doubts about the relationship between Mohan and Ji Wuji, and about Mohan's presence at his house on the night of the murder, as his mother had now testified. Faced with Yixuan's change of attitude, Shen Mohan reacted violently. She once again resorted to crying and pleading, using their relationship to pull Yixuan back. When she saw that her soft words were no longer effective, Mohan turned to threats, implying that Yixuan would regret it if he didn't trust her and turned his back on her. The confrontation took place in an extremely tense atmosphere, deepening the cracks in their relationship, and at the same time, raising serious questions about the extent of Jiyu Yixuan's involvement, knowledge, or complicity in his own family's tragedy. The pressure from the irrefutable evidence, including the jacket with fibers matching those on the murder weapon, witness testimonies about his presence in Wu Yuan, and especially Shen Mohan's betrayal as she tried to shift all the blame onto him, finally broke Ji Wuji. During a lengthy interrogation, facing the prospect of taking full responsibility for the crime, Ji Wuji made his first confession, a confession that was shocking and changed the entire course of the case. Trembling, Ji Wuji admitted that he was the one who had directly killed Jiyu Weiten. He recounted the details of his brutal actions on that fateful night, from breaking into the house and confronting the victim, to stabbing Mr. Jiyu multiple times with the knife. Wuji's voice was filled with fear and belated remorse. However, more important than his confession to the murder was what Ji Wuji revealed next. He insisted that he did not act alone, nor was he the true mastermind. The entire plan to kill Jiyu Weiten was orchestrated, instigated, and directed by Shen Mohan. Wuji testified that Mohan had come to him, crying and complaining about how Weiten was preventing her from being with Jiyu Yixuan. But the real reason Mohan wanted to eliminate Weiten, according to Wuji, was because the old man had discovered her bombshell secret. That secret was that Mohan had a common-law husband and a child in her hometown, along with her past working at the disreputable karaoke bar. Weiten had threatened to expose all of this to Jiyu Yixuan and everyone, which meant Mohan's plan to change her life by marrying Yixuan for a comfortable existence would completely fall apart. Ji Wuji detailed the plan that Shen Mohan had laid out. It was Mohan herself who had left the back kitchen door unlocked for him to sneak in. She also provided him with detailed information about Weiten's daily habits and the layout of the house. Mohan even promised Wuji that after Weiten was dead, she would quickly marry Jiyu Yixuan. Once married, she would get a portion of the Jiyu family's assets. Mohan promised to give Wuji a large sum of money, and then the two of them would run away together to start a new life somewhere else. Ji Wuji's confession not only clarified his role in the case but also stripped away Shen Mohan's facade, transforming her from a seeming victim or an unwilling participant into the cunning and ruthless mastermind behind the entire tragedy. Ji Wuji's confession, with its horrifying details about the conspiracy and Shen Mohan's role as the mastermind, sent shockwaves through the investigation. Immediately, investigators arranged a tense confrontation between Shen Mohan and Ji Wuji's new testimony. When she heard the accusations from her former lover, Shen Mohan initially reacted fiercely. She screamed and cried, accusing Ji Wuji of being a liar, of slandering her to reduce his own sentence. Mohan continued to play the part of a wronged victim, a pawn of circumstance and evil men. She tried to use her tears and fragile appearance to sway the investigators, hoping to once again escape justice. However, this time, Shen Mohan's act had no effect. The investigators were not relying solely on Ji Wuji's testimony. They presented a barrage of other evidence, pieces of the puzzle that had been carefully collected and pieced together. There was the history of frequent calls and texts between Mohan and Wuji, especially at sensitive times before and after the murder. There was Xia's testimony about Mohan being at the Jiyu house and having a tense conversation with her husband on the night of the murder, a fact Mohan had always denied. More importantly, there was the detail that Mohan knew the back kitchen entrance of the Jiyu house very well, a small but telling detail that showed her familiarity and the likelihood that she had opened the door for Ji Wuji to sneak in, as this was an entrance an outsider would be unlikely to know and use so easily. Faced with the pressure of irrefutable evidence and Ji Wuji's detailed confession, Shen Mohan began to break down. The feigned composure, the innocent and pitiful facade she had so carefully maintained for so long, gradually crumbled. It was replaced by anger, bitterness, and the despair of realizing that all her efforts to hide her crime had failed. The perfect mask that Mohan had worn for so long was finally ripped away, revealing a completely different person, one full of ambition, deceit, and a willingness to do anything to achieve her goals, including taking another person's life. Mohan's eyes no longer held a naive fear, but rather a hollowness, signaling the complete collapse of a criminal. As the criminal plot of Shen Mohan and Ji Wuji was gradually unveiled, another important question arose, putting Ji Yuxuan in an incredibly difficult position. Was he truly completely innocent and unaware of the conspiracy between his lover and Ji Wuji? Or did he, though not directly involved, play some role, whether intentionally or unintentionally, in his own family's tragedy? This was a complex issue concerning the degree of complicity of the victim's son. Investigators decided to review the entire investigation related to Ji Yuxuan, especially his psychological state, his initial statements, and the content of the text messages exchanged between him and Shen Mohan. Although Yuxuan had always maintained his innocence in his profound shock at his father's death, some details still gave them pause. While reanalyzing the text messages Ji Yuxuan had sent to Shen Mohan in the tense days before the murder, investigators found some content that expressed the young man's extreme desperation. There were haunting messages expressing a wish that his father were no longer around, or stating that he couldn't live without Mohan and was willing to do anything for them to be together. These messages, while they could be seen as words spoken in anger and desperation, also revealed a dangerous psychological state, a readiness to resort to negative actions to resolve his predicament. Faced with this evidence, and under the pressure of the investigation now that the truth about Mohan was clear, Ji Yuxuan could no longer hide it. He broke down, sobbing, and admitted a painful part of the truth. Yuxuan confessed that he did not directly participate in the plan to kill his father, nor did he know about the specific conspiracy between Shen Mohan and Ji Wuji. However, he knew that Mohan intended to do something to teach his father a lesson, or put pressure on Ji Yuxuan so he would stop opposing their marriage. Mohan had hinted to Yuxuan that she would find a way to resolve the problem with his father for good. Because he was so in love with Shen Mohan, manipulated by her, and due to his own weakness and immaturity, Ji Yuxuan chose to remain silent. He did not stop Mohan, nor did he warn his father about his girlfriend's dangerous intentions. Even worse, in a few conversations with Mohan, Yuxuan had unintentionally provided some information about his father's habits, about the times he was home alone, without ever anticipating the catastrophic consequences that could follow. His silent complicity, his indecisiveness, and his unwitting assistance to the crime, though he did not wield the knife himself, had transformed Ji Yuxuan from a mere suspect into an indispensable link in the chain of tragedy. This truth was a powerful blow to Yuxuan's conscience, and a bitter lesson about the blindness of love. With all the knots untied, with testimonies and evidence logically pieced together, Shen Mohan, facing the undeniable truth and with nothing left to lose, finally bowed her head and confessed. The defiant, challenging look she had previously worn vanished, replaced by emptiness and resignation. She began to recount the entire conspiracy, from its inception to the execution of the crime, in cold, meticulous detail. The primary motive that drove Shen Mohan to this heinous act, as Ji Wuji had testified, was not just that Ji Yuxuan refused to fund the wedding. More importantly, Yuxuan had accidentally discovered her entire unsavory past, that Mohan had a child out of wedlock whom she had abandoned, along with her time working at the notorious karaoke bar. Yuxuan, a patriarchal and conservative man, could not accept such a daughter-in-law. He had bluntly demanded that Mohan stay away from Ji Yuxuan, threatening to reveal the whole truth to Yuxuan and everyone else if she didn't let go. For Shen Mohan, this was a fatal blow. Her plan to change her life by marrying Yuxuan, to escape her poor past and dirty secrets, was on the verge of complete collapse. She was afraid of losing everything: Yuxuan's love, the chance for a comfortable life, and her own pride. That fear turned into cruelty. Mohan recounted the horrific details of the night of the murder. That evening, after Ji Yuxuan had returned to his rented room in town, Mohan went back to the Ji house. She used the excuse of wanting to talk, to persuade him one last time about the wedding. While they were talking in the living room, and Yuxuan remained resolute in his refusal, Even repeating his threat to expose her past, she knew there was no other way. That was when Ji Wooji, according to their pre-arranged plan, slipped into the house through the back kitchen door, which Mohan herself had unlocked earlier. When she saw that Whiten would not yield, Mohan gave Wooji the signal to act. Ji Wooji lunged from the shadows, attacking Whiten with the knife. Shen Mohan did not just stand by and watch. She actively participated in restraining Whiten as he tried to fight back, helping Wooji carry out the brutal act to its conclusion. Shen Mohan's cruelty was laid bare in her own confession. She was not only the mastermind who devised the detailed plan but also a direct participant who coldly watched the father of the man she loved be brutally murdered. After the crime, Mohan and Wooji quickly cleaned up the scene and disposed of the weapon. Then, she calmly returned to her rented room, creating an alibi for herself and Ji Yixuan, and continued to play the role of a grieving girlfriend, a victim of circumstance, manipulating the minds of both Yixuan and his mother, Xia. Mohan's ultimate goal, after eliminating the biggest obstacle, Ji Whiten, was to quickly marry Ji Yixuan, thereby officially entering the Ji family and seizing a portion of the wealth she craved. The final, raw, and painful truth exposed the dark nature of a person whose reason was clouded by greed and selfishness. The horrific murder case in Wuyuan County finally came to a close after months of tense and dramatic investigation. The public trial of Shen Mohan, Ji Wooji, and Ji Yixuan was held at the Jiangxi Provincial People's Court, drawing significant media attention. With irrefutable evidence and the defendants' confessions, harsh sentences were handed down. The court found that Shen Mohan was the mastermind, who initiated and planned the murder in detail. Her actions were deemed particularly heinous, her methods cruel and inhumane, not only taking the victim's life but also causing irreparable pain to the Ji family. For the crime of premeditated murder, in the role of mastermind, Shen Mohan received the highest sentence, death. Ji Wooji, who directly carried out the murder, was identified as an active accomplice, a willing instrument in Shen Mohan's conspiracy. Despite being instigated, Wooji's actions were also extremely brutal and inexcusable. For the crime of premeditated murder, as an active accomplice, Ji Wooji also received the death penalty. As for Ji Yixuan, the victim's only son, the court determined that he did not directly participate in the murder but was guilty of concealing and failing to report a crime. Although Yixuan was manipulated and used by Shen Mohan, his silence and passive complicity had helped create the conditions for the crime to occur. For his unforgivable mistakes, Ji Yixuan was sentenced to 12 years in prison. The sentences were pronounced, and justice was served, but nothing could compensate for the pain and loss. Xia, the pitiful woman, was completely devastated. In a single moment, she lost the husband she had spent her life with, and her only son was sent to prison, her family shattered. The pain of her loss was compounded by remorse, her conscience tormented for not recognizing Shen Mohan's true face sooner, for how her own weakness had indirectly contributed to the tragedy. The Ji family home, once filled with warm laughter, now stood cold and somber, haunted by an inescapable darkness. The Ji Whiten case closed, but it left behind a costly lesson, a profound warning for everyone. It is a lesson about the blindness of love, how people can be deceived by sweet words and false appearances, leading to terrible decisions. It is a lesson about the bottomless greed of human nature, how for material desires and personal selfishness, people can be willing to trample on morality, on human decency, and even take another's life. The pressures from society and family, if not handled with clear-headedness and wisdom, can also push people to the brink of crime. The selfishness and cruelty of Shen Mohan and Ji Wooji were paid for with their own lives. The innocent victim, Ji Whiten, suffered an unjust and painful death. The ignorance, weakness, and refusal to face the truth on the part of Ji Yixuan also contributed to the irreversible tragedy. This case will forever remain a painful scar in the community, a reminder of the value of family, honesty, and the fragile line between good and evil that exists within every human being.